and he's plugging into the whole ideology of slowness. That is a very important feature of our cultural moment, the idea of slow food, for example, the idea of slow cities. But when you're pushing all the way down to this, past psychology and into the space of biology, what you're pushing against are some pretty, you're starting to ignore some pretty basic facts about human beings as animals, which is that we did evolve as carnivores. With all due respect to the vegetarians in the room, our lineage is of a series of carnivores. And carnivores like to go fast, and they need to go fast, because only if you go fast you get anything. So we have some of that coded into us, and it's something that we always have to be aware of. And we also, of course, live in a world in which most of us inevitably have to be in a hurry to some degree. So it's an interesting challenge. Another way to think about this, another way to think about the slow transit item that Darren just, that quote I just gave you from Darren Gordon, even if you love that vision, even if you would like to live in that world, and I could probably imagine it would be nice to live in that world, the challenge is that emotionally intense visions often imagine a finished future but not a credible path from here to there. That's certainly, I think, the problem with slow transit. I think we can all figure out that even if we would all like to live in a slower universe, well, tomorrow we could tell King County Metro, just don't drive more than 10 miles an hour. We wouldn't like it. We wouldn't like it. We would need some kind of transition process. And when you're putting out a vision that's that fundamentally transformational, the route from here to there is almost more interesting than the vision. Or at least to me, coming from a practical standpoint, how do you get from here to there? Arcosanti, another lovely example of the same thing. Arcosanti is a utopian city that is being built next to Interstate 17 in the middle of Arizona. It was designed by a brilliant architect by the name of Paolo Soleri, who came up with this magnificent vision of what a city would be in the future. It's basically all one giant connected building. Everyone goes everywhere as a pedestrian. It of course, takes very little land, and so has lots of respect for open space, plenty of space for agriculture, all that sort of idealism. But that particular foundation is trying to build it, as if that's how you get to it. Let's just start building the infrastructure, and that will cause a city and the economic reality of a city to occur. That's not happening. That's not how it's working. And so what's important is not just to have a vision. If you have the vision, then you're ready to write science fiction. If you have a beautiful, consistent vision of the future, then that's great. You have a science fiction novel, but you don't yet have a way of getting there from here. Personal rapid transit, another very, very interesting idea that will, I think, probably never die. The idea that if we just built viaducts over every street in the city, then we could have these little pod cars that would be waiting right outside wherever we are and be ready to go wherever we're going. These would be little cars where we could ride alone or just with our group. In other words, the whole technology, the whole theory of it is about making sure that people never have to get into a vehicle with strangers and never encounter anyone that they don't intend to encounter in the ways that can happen on transit. And so these little pods are going to just glide through this computerized network and come to rest wherever your destination is. And the pods will sometimes be sort of hooked up and will run together in certain stretches, and they'll automatically be separated out and routed. So yes, if we had these viaducts over every street in the city, you could do this. The problem is personal rapid transit doesn't scale. You can't, it doesn't have an implementation path. You build a little bit of it and you don't have anything. You don't have anything until you have all of it. And so it doesn't, even if you were all okay about having viaducts over every street in the city, and I think what we know from the Seattle Monorail project is that many people are not okay with that, there's no way to get to it. The other thing, of course, that happens is that often visions fixate on a transit vehicle rather than on the surface it's proposed to operate. We lose track of what we're trying to do because the vehicle itself is so exciting, particularly, for example, the Strasbourg tram. And one of the things that I only realized this very recently, but now that I think of it, it's completely obvious. One of the reasons why that particular vehicle is so sexy is that it's futuristic and nostalgic at the same time. Right? It's the past and the future at the same time. It's the past because we had streetcars 100 years ago, and we're always telling ourselves that we need to just put them back the way they were, and we'll get back to an idealized, to how great life was in 1920. But also they have this rounded, somewhat phallic kind of end, which is meant to suggest aerodynamics, right? It's meant to resemble an airplane, even though the thing is never going to go faster than about 40 miles an hour, and you don't need the aerodynamics in that case. So, some people who've read the blog probably have the impression that I'm against streetcars, which is not the case. I'm a great admirer of good streetcars that have actually been designed to serve a purpose and that have been meticulously managed with that purpose in mind. So, a lot of conversations we're having in the transit world, we have too much practicality in the room and not enough vision. And that gives us very conventional operations and bureaucratic thinking, which we might describe as being stuck in the present. On the other hand, we get a lot of visionary thinking, which does not have enough practical thinkers at the table as it develops, and thus we end up with beautiful visions with no way to get to them. And you could describe that, I think, fairly as being stuck in the future, not able to build a bridge back to where we are so that we could see how to get there. We need more voices in the middle. And that's what I'm trying to do with human transit in my own way, and it's also what I'm trying to encourage in other conversations. We need to have, we need voices that really understand the importance of vision, but that have enough grounding in the basic underlying geometry, the facts of life of geometry and physics that any vision is going to have to work with. And maybe some facts of life about biology, such as the fact that we evolved from carnivores and therefore have a natural interest in speed. Those kinds of things need to be present at the table to have really effective conversations. So I say that for better outcomes, we should start by respecting the universality of transit's geometry, and to avoid what we have sometimes seen, and what I would argue took place on the Quarrels streetcar, where we use the rush of excitement about a project to just overrule the geometry and pretend that it's not important. That can work politically. It just doesn't work technically. It doesn't actually work. So let's speed up on San Francisco. Wonderful example of a incredibly popular project. Incredibly, supernaturally popular project. Incredibly popular because BART was, everyone in San Francisco knew what BART was. It was this very modern, very, rather fast and reliable, exclusive right-of-way, third rail underground rapid transit system. And so when you said to anyone in San Francisco, BART to the airport, easy win. I mean, absolutely. Everybody wants transit to the airport, after all, because everyone's going to the airport once a year or so and thinks they'll like it. And this is why, universally in every transit system I've ever worked in or for, all the way down to little bus systems like Boise that are thinking about service to the airport. Service to the airport is like several orders of magnitude more popular than its actual ridership will ultimately be. And so you always have to just be, as planners, we're always being aware of that. So anyway, the geographical situation they had at San Francisco Airport was that the extension that came down from San Francisco went through a couple of very low density, very NIMBYist cities that really did not want any more density at all, but nevertheless wanted BART stations to stay along the way. So San Bruno is one of those, and so San Bruno is the last of them. And then at that point, there was SFO, which was the airport terminal itself, and there was also Millbrae, which was a connection point with the Caltrain commuter rail system that goes all the way down to San Jose from there. So quite a large catchment of potential passengers were being brought to Millbrae and potentially connected to go either to the airport or to go on into the city. That map, that kind of drawing is what we saw all through that debate.